The Pope did not return from Spain with a travel report. He returned with faces. A child reading a letter in a parish, victims of abuse asking to be heard, inmates waiting in prison, young people carrying anxiety and aspiration at the same time, migrants in reception centers in the Canary Islands, many of them forced from Africa toward a future they could not secure at home. Those were not side notes to Pope Leo XIV's apostolic journey. They were the human evidence behind his words in St. Peter's Square, when he said the people of God in Spain had given him great comfort through their joyful expression of faith and affection. That comfort did not come from nostalgia. Spain has an ancient and rich Catholic tradition, but it is also a country marked by serious social and cultural change. The deeper surprise was not that Catholic memory still exists there. The surprise was that faith still had enough life to welcome, listen, and ask for unity on a foundation deeper than ideology. The comfort Leo described came from a country that can no longer be explained by its Catholic past alone. Spain matters here because it is not a blank page. It is one of the great Catholic landscapes of Europe, shaped by centuries of saints, churches, pilgrimages, monasteries, popular devotion, theological memory, and public Catholic life. Pope Leo called it a European country with an ancient and very rich Catholic tradition. But he also named the other side of the story. Spain has undergone significant social and cultural changes. That tension is the doorway into the whole journey. A pope visiting Spain is never only visiting a nation with Catholic history. He is visiting a people living between inheritance and change. The question is not whether the past was rich. It was. The question is whether that inheritance can still become a living source of communion in a society where old religious assumptions no longer hold everyone together. That is why Leo thanked God, the entire Spanish people, the king, the civil authorities, the bishops, and the church communities. His gratitude was not just diplomatic courtesy. It recognized that a papal journey depends on more than one institution. It involves the state, the church, local communities, and ordinary people who show whether faith still has public warmth. Leo also explained the deeper purpose of the journey. As Bishop of Rome, he came to confirm the faithful and to encourage them to overcome every form of division and conflict by promoting communion, dialogue, and unity in diversity. That is the service of the successor of Peter. It is not only to appear, bless, and depart. It is to strengthen a local church where the gospel has to be lived inside real social pressure. Apostolic journeys express that service differently in every country. Leo said they are adapted to the ecclesial and social situations of the places visited. In Spain, that meant speaking to a church with deep roots, but also to a society where unity cannot be assumed. It has to be chosen again. That is why the warmth of the welcome became one of the most important facts of the journey. Pope Leo's reflection turned the Spanish welcome into something more than crowd size. He said that during the journey he saw people of every age and situation looking forward to the Pope's visit and welcoming him with great warmth. Then he added the line that gives the whole reflection its edge. This fact, he said, was not to be taken for granted and was worthy of reflection. That matters because Leo was not flattering Spain. He was reading Spain. He acknowledged that the participation expressed the faith of the Spanish people. But he also saw something beneath it, a widespread need to find unity on a true and deep foundation, one that is neither ideological nor based on partial interests. That is a severe diagnosis. A society can be crowded, loud, emotional, and still be fragmented underneath. A people can gather warmly and still be searching for something strong enough to hold them together after the public moment passes. For Leo, that foundation is Christ. Not a party, not a cultural mood, not a temporary alliance of interests. Only Christ can ensure the kind of unity that does not collapse into ideology or self-protection. That is why the warmth of the crowds mattered. But it was not the end of the story. It was a sign of hunger. Then he retraced the journey itself. He remembered the liturgical celebrations in Madrid and Barcelona, and he remembered praying the Holy Rosary at the Abbey of Montserrat. Those places carried different kinds of weight. Madrid and Barcelona placed the church in the life of major modern cities. Montserrat placed the journey inside a deeper current of prayer, pilgrimage, and Marian devotion. Together, they showed what Leo called the encounter of ancient and modern, Catholic tradition and contemporary culture. That encounter allowed him, he said, to perceive firsthand the character of Europe and its inestimable wealth. But he insisted that this wealth is a living reality, not a thing of the past. That sentence is important because it refuses two easy errors. Europe is not saved by nostalgia. But Europe is also not free to treat its Christian inheritance as dead museum material. A living heritage has to be received, guarded, and used for the present. Leo said that heritage must be safeguarded with care so that it can be invested in today's global world. And then he named the challenges waiting for it. Peace, integral ecology, equitable and sustainable development, and respect for human dignity. In other words, Spain's Catholic inheritance is not meant to stay locked inside beautiful buildings. It has to answer the crises of the world now. Then the journey moved from Europe's inheritance to Europe's wounds. Europe's inheritance now has to face a world that is changing faster than its old certainties can manage. That is why Pope Leo connected the journey to challenges already recognized by the Second Vatican Council and revisited by later Catholic teaching. Peace, integral ecology, equitable and sustainable development, and respect for human dignity. These are not separate issues placed beside each other for balance. They are signs of a world asking whether the human person still comes before power, profit, technology, and fear. Leo also referred to his own encyclical Magnifica Humanitas, which aims to safeguard the human person in the age of artificial intelligence. That detail matters because the Spain journey was not only about preserving the past, it was about asking whether Catholic tradition can still protect human dignity in a world where even human intelligence, work, attention, and identity are being reshaped by machines. A church that only remembers what it once was will not be enough. A church that forgets what it has received will not be enough either. That is why Leo said he perceived, through the various meetings, a need to hear through the Pope's voice the gospel of hope for today's humanity. He described that humanity as sorely tried by the negative consequences of a deceptive model of development. That is a strong phrase. A deceptive model of development promises progress while leaving people wounded, isolated, displaced, exploited, or unheard. It can build systems that look successful from a distance, while the human person becomes smaller inside them. And then Leo named the people who made that warning concrete. He remembered the faces of the little ones and the poor. He remembered the child who read his letter in the parish. He remembered victims of abuse who asked to be heard. He remembered inmates waiting for him in prison. He remembered young people full of anxiety and aspirations. He remembered migrants in reception centers in the Canary Islands. Those faces prevent the journey from becoming an elegant reflection on Europe. The little ones and the poor ask whether the Church's language of dignity reaches those with the least protection. The child with the letter asks whether a young voice can still be received as something sacred. Victims of abuse asking to be heard remind the Church that communion cannot be built on silence. Inmates waiting in prison force the question of whether mercy can enter places society prefers not to see. Young people carrying anxiety and aspiration show a generation that still wants a future, even when the future feels unstable. Migrants in the Canary Islands reveal the human cost of a world where movement is often born not from opportunity, but from desperation. The Canary Islands gave the final leg of the journey a particular urgency. Leo recalled the local church there, which welcomes a large number of forced migrants coming mainly from Africa. He admitted that migration is complex and requires organic and coordinated action plans. That honesty matters. The church is not allowed to reduce migration to a slogan because real people, real communities, real borders, real resources, and real fears are involved. Yet Leo said this interpretation opens a broader perspective. Christians are called to reread the gospel in today's world, exchanging with one another the gifts of their respective cultures, and especially the fruits produced by the fruitfulness of Christ's message. That is not sentimental multiculturalism. It is a demanding Catholic vision of encounter. People and peoples are not problems to be managed first. They are bearers of gifts, wounds, histories, and graces that can only be received through real fraternity. One fruit of Christ's message, Leo said, is dialogue between people and between peoples and encounter in a spirit of fraternity. Then he admitted the line that keeps the whole vision honest. This path is not easy. It requires goodwill and God's help, but it leads to the civilization of love. The motto of the journey was not a slogan. It was the demand placed on everyone who had seen those faces. To lift up the gaze is not to look away from the wounded. It is to look at Spain's ancient faith, Europe's restless present, the child with the letter, the victims asking to be heard, the inmates waiting in prison, the young people carrying anxiety and hope, and the migrants arriving from Africa and still refuse to believe that fragmentation gets the final word. Pope Leo's journey ended with an invitation that was also a demand. Look higher, not because the world is simple, but because Christ is the only foundation deep enough to hold people together when every smaller foundation fails. If this helped you understand what the Church is actually doing in the world, liking the video helps more people find this kind of Catholic coverage. Subscribe for more Catholic news, Vatican context, and stories from the living history of the Church. And tell me in the comments, where do you most see the Church needing to help people lift their gaze today? The story continues, and so does the work.